It can be really tempting, right, to say, oh, I have to show them how hard I'm working. I have to show them all of this detail, all of this minutia so they know that I'm smart and I'm thinking behind the scenes. And you end up with a situation where I'm like, who cares?
Hey, what's up, everybody, and welcome to Growth Mentors, the podcast where we share snackable growth hacks, strategies, and best practices in how to drive maximum marketing impact and grow your bottom line. I'm your host, Matt LeBlanc, and today we are going to be talking about the Marketing Creative State of the Union Address. So the insights that you hear today could be used for a creative quarterly benchmark report, or I don't know what cadence you do your big creative powwows, but if you are looking to reflect on things that have run in the past and pull insights to share with stakeholders, set new KPIs, and sort of forecast for the future, we're going to be giving you some really actionable strategies to do all of those things. So here to help me do it is the Senior Creative Strategist from Jump 450, Renee Scavone. How you doing, Renee?
I'm doing all right, Matt. Really excited to talk about creative today. I think definitely this is a big puzzle piece that potentially not a lot of people are paying enough attention to when they're thinking about their quarterly reporting. So excited to really dive in deep here.
Yes, Renee, you are a creative powerhouse. And what I love about you is you really have kind of both parts of this brain, right? You have like the really sort of like squishier, creative kind of like brainstorming part. And then you also have like the super organized kind of, you were able to sort of break all of this down in a really kind of simple way for people to kind of follow this plan to come up with, really get the most out of a creative QBR. Yeah,
definitely. And, I think your phrasing of the sort of the squishy versus the more in the box is really what's at the heart of this. It's so easy to have so much excitement about creative and, you have so many ideas all over the place. And really what I want to talk about today is how do we actually organize that into a structure that, not only is it going to help you in your own planning and your own keeping everything straight, but it's also going to be really digestible and accessible to the people you're speaking to that might not, have an art direction background or have a particularly creative background.
Yeah, because, the reality is that creative can be sort of this thing that doesn't have a lot of like traditional structure to it. People don't really know. Not everybody sort of structures their meetings the same, and QBR or, whatever your sort of big creative state of the union is, it's sort of like people can tend to either share too much and it's not digestible, or they can share too little and just sort of be doing the bare minimum. So I think that we're kind of like laying out a plan here to strike a really nice balance and how to take action away from the insights that we draw.
Yeah, and certainly to your point, I think the first step in doing that is sort of talking to whomever is the key stakeholder that you're going to be meeting with and figuring out what are their goals, right? There are people who are happy to just sit there while you list off, and this week we did this ad, and this week we did this ad, right? But oftentimes that's not really the expectation, or is not really the best usage of the time, right? You never want to be in a scenario where you're just going through slides that could have been a bulleted list in an email, right? Because not only is that not engaging, but it's also just not informative. It's not a good usage of people's time. So I would say sort of the first step to determining what you need to do, right, is having that open and honest conversation. And this goes for, people who are on the agency side as well as on the brand side, right? I think that's super applicable no matter what side of the spectrum that you're on, just making sure you have those open lines of communication to really move forward and have it be, actually engaging and accessible. Because to your point, I think so many people, a QBR or a creative brainstorm team up, that means so many different things to so many different people. And I think definitely, especially if you're early on in the industry, it can be like, oh, I don't know. I think I know what this one thing is. Like, I guess this is what everybody else is thinking. But, not being afraid to actually have those open conversations, I think is really key.
Definitely. So why don't we just move into what are some of the goals that everybody should be shooting for in one of these meetings? What should be kind of aiming to take away?
Yeah. So I think specifically, right, what are the actionable next steps that whoever your creative partner is can take to reflect back on whatever testing or creative production you've done in the past quarter or however many months, and, really have concrete plan coming out of that. right? You never want to just be sending stuff blindly into the ether. That's not, especially in digital these days, right? That's not a tenable strategy. So that's the really big one from the creative perspective. However, when you're thinking about other key stakeholders, when you're thinking, oh, maybe this presentation is going to go up the ladder to a CEO somewhere, you want it to be something that is easily understood in terms of where are we and where are we going, right?
Yep.
So having something that is, again, accessible to somebody who maybe doesn't know creative lingo, having it laid out in such a way that's like, okay, here's our cause, here's our effect, here's our ad, here's the KPIs, it either hit the mark or didn't hit the mark, here's what we're gonna do next. Can you say that in 3 sentences so that somebody who is, drinking a coffee and driving a car while they listen to this meeting notes is going to actually retain it? I would say the end goal of a really strong creative meeting like this.
Absolutely. And I think that we kind of already touched on a couple of these things, but just kind of for context, what are some things that people really commonly get wrong in these presentations and in these meetings?
So I would say, again, just treating it like a creative review, going down the laundry list of here's what we did. People know what you did, and so not spending too much time there. I would also say on the other side, I don't want to just show creative. I want to show that I know the numbers too. I'm going to share a bunch of data that's maybe not necessarily connected to the creative, right? You always want to be telling a story, crafting a narrative, and not just saying, hey, this is this ad, it spent this much amount of money, because I don't really care how much money it spent if I don't know how much money the other ad is spending, et cetera.
Right.
If I don't understand, what was the goal of the campaign. A secondary that I think is very common for people who are like, yes, I want to come in and do a great job, is just trying to cram in way too much information.
Yep.
You sort of end up with that sort of word salad of, you talk nonstop for 60 minutes and at the end, nobody remembers anything. The final sort of pitfall that I would say, and goes back to what I was talking about at the beginning of the call, is just, the lacking an understanding of what their audience needs and wants. And again, not having the right narrative to present to whomever is, on the other end of that call.
Definitely. And, I think that the other thing that sort of complicates this whole process is that you really only have a couple of slides to communicate all of this in, right? Because the creative's going to get presented with, every other area of the QBR. And so you really only have a little bit of time to kind of get these key insights out.
Absolutely. You want to do it succinct and you want to do it, ideally memorable, right? And you can't get stuff that's super memorable if it's a run-on sentence, right? You really want to think, okay, again, cause and effect. What is my basic, here's the statement, here's the result. You can take it home with you. It's
always sort of startling to me when I see a creative person do a presentation and it's really boring. They just, it's just sort of drone on and it gets too maybe into the weeds or into the data or whatever it is. And it's just what? The creative, make it memorable, make it fun, make it impactful. So, it's a pitch a little bit too. Hey guys, this is what we did. This is what we pulled from it. This is how we're going to use those insights to sort of show you where we're going. Yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it goes back to the idea of are you squishy or are you in a box? You can't box it so tight. It's who cares, right? You still have to have that flair. You still have to have that excitement about the creative process while, of course, being informative.
Yeah. So Renee, let's jump into sort of the more actionable part of this and kind of begin to lay out how somebody can prepare for one of these meetings. How do we sort of reflect upon creative and the data and then go about collecting that for this meeting?
I'll say in an ideal world, you are throughout the quarter, you've got your big spreadsheet, right, of, I ran this ad and it had these 3 openers and this was the winner. And then I read this ad, it had these 3 CTAs, et cetera, et cetera. I would say most people, myself included, aren't really doing that in the day-to-day, right? They're not, it's a great habit to get into, but realistically, probably people don't already have this data set up. So the first thing you want to do, right, is, if you're working with media buyers, communicate with those folks. Obviously, they're in the data every day, so they're going to be the ones who are the most familiar with it, right? But then also diving into a data platform like Tableau or Motion, and really, okay, well, how am I going to get my facts? And I would say, right, sometimes when you go into that, when you're looking at, a spreadsheet full of a quarter's worth of ads, that can be really overwhelming, especially, again, if you're maybe not necessarily a strong numbers person. So what I like to think about, instead of oh man, I have all these different variables of opener, ender, color, whatever, I would like to start by either thinking in ad set or in theme, right? And then I move on to winners and losers. And what I mean by that is, let's think about the ads that are about the same idea, right? I have a hairspray ad, and 3 of my ads are about how good it smells, and 2 are about, the hold power. I don't need to compare all 5 ads. I need to say, okay, well, these 3 are about the great smell. Let's only talk about these 3. Let's make it so micro. Okay, in these 3, what was the winner? What was the loser? And again, you can really spell it out by, can you make a sentence, right? A very, very simple, easy to understand sentence about what is the winner. So you can say, okay, in ad set 3 about hair strength hold, you can say that in ad set 3 that features the ads that talk about the smell, the ad featuring the color blue beat out the ad featuring the color red, right? That's very easy to understand. You don't have to go super deep with it, super floral with it. And then the next sentence would be in ad set 4, which was all about the power of the hold. The ad showing multiple products beat out the ad that showed only one product, right? So as you start to do these very, very simple sentences, just kind of going, ad set by ad set, theme by theme, you will start to notice patterns, right? You'll start to say, okay, well, the ad we ran in week 3 had the blue one was the winner. Oh, and the ad we ran in week 12, the blue one was the winner, right? And so it's all about making the pattern recognition easier, right? So you don't have to take up that mental space. If you are in a scenario where it's like, man, a pattern is really not emerging, you are still learning something, right? You're learning, okay, maybe I need to structure my tests a little bit differently, or put a finer point on the creative that I'm making. So the first step really is gather your data and start making very, very simplistic comparisons.
Great. So we sort of talked just now about sort of reflecting and collecting the creative and the data, and then also kind of how to start to find the patterns within that, right? And so just so I'm clear, are you doing this? You said you're pulling winners and losers. You're looking for patterns in both. Yeah?
Yes. I would say if you're just starting out, it probably is more beneficial to focus on the winner, just because, the nature of how the ad set works, right? Oftentimes you'll have one clear winner that's sucking up all the spend, but maybe, it's like, well, this one had $5 to spend versus $4 to spend, et cetera. So I would say if you're starting out in this process, the first thing I would do is focus on the winners.
Great. And then I know that we're about to sort of talk through how we take these patterns and turn them into kind of insights and a forecast. Right? Let's back into this a little bit. Tell me, what are we ultimately looking to boil all of this down to?
Ultimately, we want to walk out of this experience being able to say, these are the tests that we ran. This is the thing that we learned from it. This is what we're going to do next, right?
Yeah.
And if you think about that, not only is that valuable for whoever is a key stakeholder, whoever wants to know, okay, well, where is the money we're giving you going, right? But that's also so valuable to you as a creative, because boom, there's your, next quarter creative roadmap. There's your 30, 60, 90-day plan. And again, you just have to take it back to the box and the squishy metaphor, right? If we give ourselves this box to be in of I know what tests I need to do, I don't have to waste mental energy thinking about, should I do this variable or this variable? I can instead think about, I'm going to be really fun and creative because I know exactly the goal of my creative project. So I can just really explore without having to stress about this other part of it.
Great. So taking us sort of back to our path here, now that we've sort of collected everything, we've determined our patterns between our winners and losers, how do we turn it into that forecast that you just sort of illustrated for us?
So the first step, again, in just looking at the winners is, what is the commonality here, of course, and then how can I create more ads that share that commonality? So a very, very concrete example, right, would be, I see that ads that showcase our product in front of a seamless background, those are really doing better than ads that are more lifestyle photography, right? So then your next step is, okay, I know that the next shoot that I order is going to be on seamless. A bigger step back is do we need to start putting more money in buying more seamless backgrounds and stop putting money in lifestyle photography shoots? It can really be quite impactful, from a business standpoint about the types of decisions that you're making. But alternatively, if it's just it seems like the ads that are themed, where a talent is talking about how much they love the quick delivery of the product, those ads seem to be performing better than any of the other ads, right? So it's not just, what are the individual winners and losers of each ad set? It's relatively, this ad might be the best from ad set number 3. This ad from ad set number 6 is spending 6 times as much, right? So, not every winner is going to be the winner, which I think is a really important call out. And, we can get really stuck in the weeds from a creative perspective, I think sometimes. So having that sort of step back, we can focus our energies a little bit more. To speak on themes, if you notice, okay, this theme is really performing well across all these different sorts of ads, well, then my next thought is, okay, how can I execute this in a different medium? If it's a UGC ad, how can I take the most compelling 5 seconds of that UGC, where people are clicking through, and just have that be a headline on a static ad? Or maybe this static is doing so well, can we have a talent read it? Can we put in some motion graphics? Again, you can sort of isolate that variable that you really want to test, and then you have so much creative freedom to sort of go from there.
That's great. So Renee, I feel like we've sort of taken us all the way through the process here. So just to kind of go back and reiterate a little bit of this, right? Because this is all sort of going to be happening in just a couple of slides. I really love the note that you gave at the beginning about sort of like crafting your narrative, right? That's ultimately what you're going to be trying to do in this presentation. You just got a little bit of time to do it. So we're looking at our winners and our losers. And the way that we're doing that is if you're on the agency side or on the team side and you're going to be presenting in this meeting, then you're talking to your buyers, you're using, whatever tools that are on hand, but you're really kind of going through theme by theme or ad set by ad set and picking those winners and those losers. You're writing like a log line for each one of them, right?
Yeah.
And I think that you've been keeping the examples within this talk really simple. Hey, red beat blue. I think obviously people are going to be applying this to deeper insights than that, right? But I like how you're talking about it so simply, because that's how simple the log lines should be, right?
Exactly.
You don't have to pack in the whole story into that one log line. It's kind of like make it super digestible for yourself, right? Because we're kind of like way down in the details. We're going to come up with a bunch of these log lines. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so now I've got my list of log lines, and now I can go and start looking for the pattern. Where do I see repeats? What has been winning across ad sets or across themes, right? And kind of using those things to craft, my forecast for what I want to go after in the future. I love it. It's digestible, it's tight, it's actionable. And guys, do not sleep on the squishier part of this talk, which is to make it feel fun, memorable. We kind of glaze over in a lot of these meetings, and it's really easy to do a presentation like that. Try to bring some energy to it and something interesting. Renee, I guess just one more question for you. Now I have my sort of like forecast of like, this is what I think we should go after. Do you think it's appropriate in one of these meetings to bring a pitch or two for maybe a concept or a style that I think that we should go after in the coming quarter?
Yes, absolutely. And I think this is sort of a twofold situation, right? You can say, hey, I've looked at all this data. I've given you bite-sized information about why you should care about it. And here's the idea that comes from all of this. This is the synthesis. This is built a better baseball player kind of scenario, right?
Yeah.
I've made the Frankenstein perfect ad. And the other half of that, right, is you're saying, okay, here are all these tests we ran. What if we did something completely different? And that's a really good time to sort of pitch more of those out of the box ideas, right? Because they've just sat through 3 slides of, okay, here's what we're doing, here's what we're doing, here's what we're doing. Now we can open it up, and it's not going to be the exact same stuff you've all seen before. And so you can really take an opportunity, especially, on those calls with maybe some of those more higher up key stakeholders to get that kind of buy-in of like, hey, you trusted us with this, and here's what happened. You should also trust us with this brand new thing.
Right. And I think that it's also sort of important to say about that point that, this pitch that you might give about a concept or a style, it's really to sort of whet the appetite, right? We're not going down an entire path of, there shouldn't be a script, I would think, or anything like that. It's like maybe a visual representation and like 1 to 3 lines kind of describing it, but just something to sort of like plant a seed and let everybody kind of walk away with some inspiration for what we're going to make together. I love it. Digestible, actionable. Renee, thank you so much for sharing today. Do you have any kind of takeaways or anything like that you want to share before we end?
2 main takeaways here from my perspective. One is, we talk a lot about what is the log line? What are the very simplistic things that you can break this down to? And when you're thinking about that next step, we talked about, this becomes, your outlook or your 30, 60, 90-day plan moving forward to this. Next quarter, when you're in Q1 and you're thinking about Q4, you can go back to this document and really say, okay, I'm checking my work. I'm holding myself accountable. I have sort of a shorthand for here's what I said I was going to do based on what happened. Did I actually do that? And then, that inspires a lot of conversations. Why or why not? Were we successful? How do we sort of change our perspective going into this next quarter? So it's really a practice that continues to build the more you do it. And again, you just get much better returns the more you sort of apply a framework to all of your creativity, right?
And just one thing to plug in there, guys, have the confidence to go back and sort of check your work in that way. I think that a lot of times, we can sort of veer towards this way. Well, God, if I go back and check my work, like what if I didn't do something that I said in the QBR? And the truth is this is a really collaborative process. There are a lot of reasons that a lot of decisions get made in one way or another. And, for that reason, it's important to go back and sort of, you're checking the work of the group, right? If we said that we were going to test in a certain area and that was kind of part of the forecast, and then we didn't get to do that because you didn't get approvals or, whatever was holding you back from doing that, those are important and key insights to really be bringing up in that next QBR.
Yeah, certainly. Really important conversations to be having, especially when you aren't sitting down with, again, key stakeholders every week. So
Right.
Being able to take that step back, I think that's a really good call out, Matt. And then in terms of any other sort of closing thoughts, that was a more logistical thought, but I'll talk about from the perspective of when you're actually in this situation presenting these ideas, it can be really tempting, right, to say, oh, I have to show them how hard I'm working. I have to show them all of this detail, all of this minutia, so they know that I'm smart and I'm thinking behind the scenes. And you end up with a situation where I'm like, who cares? Genuinely never want somebody to walk out of a presentation thinking like, whatever, I could have slept through that. It could have been an email. And that's really a danger of a lot of these presentations, especially in a QBR format where maybe you're the last to speak after 15 buyers, right? So you need to resist the urge to get so in the weeds with this stuff. Really, again, focus on that big picture, right? It's not about, oh, we tweaked this line of copy 6 different times, because again, like who cares? If I'm your boss, that doesn't impact me at all.
Yeah.
So really what you need to be thinking about here is big picture, what actually makes the difference. And if you can produce those results that are showing I did this and it made a difference, nobody's going to worry about, oh, but have you been thinking about this tiny thing in the background? They're going to be like, great, let me sign you another check, So I'd say really this goes back to what you said, Matt, going in there with that confidence and that ability to say, this is what's happening, this is what I'm going to do about it, I think really puts you, leagues ahead of a lot of other ways to present creative.
Absolutely. So if you are on the agency side or the creative team side and you're listening to this, I think a lot of really great kind of process action items to take from this. If you are on the brand side and you're approaching a QBR, I hope that you can take some of these insights and sort of use them to set expectations with your agency or with your creative team. Maybe you disagree with something that we said here, or maybe you have something to add, get in the comments with that, or just apply it to that communication thread that you have with your creative team, because that really kind of takes us right back to where we started, Renee, which is start by setting expectations, find out on both sides what should be shared in this meeting. So Renee, thank you so much. This is Renee Scavone, the Senior Creative Strategist at Jump 450. And if you are listening and you are interested in exploding your own digital growth, you can get in touch with Jump 450 in the link below in the description. That is www.jump450.com. And don't forget to subscribe for more weekly episodes. We'll see you next time.